The massive chamber of the Galactic Tribunal fell silent as Marcus Stone stood before the towering bench. The human's broad shoulders and sturdy frame looked out of place among the delicate alien forms that filled the room. Floating screens cast a pale blue light across the polished floor, displaying evidence files that would decide his fate. High Judge Bright, a tall, slender being from a low-gravity world, peered down at Marcus through compound eyes. The judge's translucent skin pulsed with waves of deep purple, a sign of displeasure among his kind. Marcus Stone of Earth, you stand accused of dangerous aggression against Council Member Glow during the Peace Summit on Station 7. Bright's voice echoed through the chamber. How do you respond to these charges? Marcus kept his voice steady, though his jaw tightened slightly. With all due respect, Your Honor, I acted in self-defense. The security feeds clearly show Council Member Glow attempted to inject me with an unknown substance. Murmurs rippled through the audience. The collection of alien diplomats and officials shifted in their anti-gravity seats, their various appendages twitching with excitement at the drama unfolding before them. Silence. Judge Bright's skin flashed a brilliant white. The council member has explained that he was merely offering a traditional greeting from his culture. Your violent response resulted in 3 broken limbs and severe damage to his outer membrane. Marcus wanted to point out that no traditional greeting involved sneaking up behind someone with a needle, but he held his tongue. He had learned during his 5 years as a human diplomat that the Galactic Tribunal rarely sided against its own kind. The second judge, a floating mass of crystal formations named Clear, chimed in with a sound like tinkling bells. The human's strength and aggressive response prove what many have long suspected. Their species is too dangerous to be allowed full participation in galactic society. Marcus noticed several human observers in the gallery tensing at these words. Counselor Reed, Earth's senior representative, maintained a carefully neutral expression, but her fingers were white where they gripped her datapad. Judge Bright's skin settled into a deep blue of formal declaration. This tribunal has reached its decision. To demonstrate the consequences of unchecked aggression and to protect the more delicate species of our society, we sentence Marcus Stone to exile. A wave of anticipation swept through the chamber. Exile could mean many things in the vast expanse of controlled space. The sentence will be carried out on Crucible. The chamber erupted in gasps and exclamations. Even the usually stoic Counselor Reed took a sharp breath. Crucible was notorious throughout the galaxy. A heavy-gravity world with extreme weather, aggressive predators, and terrain that seemed designed to kill. No sentenced criminal had survived there for more than a week. Marcus felt every eye in the room fixed on him, waiting for him to break down or beg for mercy. Instead, a small smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. Judge Clear vibrated in confusion, their crystalline structure catching the light. You find humor in your death sentence, human. Not humor, Your Honor, Marcus replied calmly. Just appreciation for the irony. You see, I grew up in the Australian outback on Earth. Spent 15 years as a survival instructor there before joining the diplomatic courts. His smile widened slightly. Crucible might just feel like home. The judges conferred quickly, their confusion evident. They had expected tears, pleading, or at least fear. This calm acceptance was unsettling. The sentence stands, Judge Bright declared finally, though his skin had taken on an uncertain shade of green. You will be transported to Crucible within the hour. May whatever gods you worship have mercy on your soul. As the guards led him away, Marcus caught Counselor Reed's eye. The senior diplomat gave him the slightest of nods, and he could have sworn he saw the ghost of a smile on her face. The gathered aliens watched him leave, whispering among themselves about the strange human who smiled at death. None of them realized they had just started a chain of events that would shake the very foundations of their galactic society. The transport pod crashed through Crucible's thick atmosphere, its heat shields glowing orange. Inside, Marcus braced himself against the crushing gravity. Even with the pod's gravity dampeners, he could feel the planet's pull, more than twice what he was used to on Earth. Through the viewport, he watched 3 other pods descending nearby, carrying the week's other condemned prisoners. One contained a floating gas being from the cloud cities of Jupiter, another held a crystalline entity from the asteroid belts, and the third carried a silicon-based creature from a low-gravity moon. The pod slammed into the rocky ground, its door hissing open to release him into his new home. Marcus took his first breath of Crucible's air, thick, hot, and humid. The gravity hit him like a heavy blanket, making each movement a challenge. But unlike the pain screams coming from the other pods, he stayed silent, focused on adjusting his breathing. First task: survive the first hour, he muttered to himself, scanning the alien landscape. The ground was a mix of black rocks and dark red soil. Strange, twisted trees with metallic-looking bark grew in clusters, their leaves shifting colors as they tracked the movement of Crucible's twin suns. A high-pitched scream cut through the air. The gas being had tried to float as it usually did, only to be crushed down by the gravity. Its containment suit cracked, and within seconds, its essence dispersed into Crucible's atmosphere. One down, Marcus thought grimly. The observation drones buzzed overhead, broadcasting every moment back to the eager audience at the Galactic Tribunal. Marcus ignored them, focusing instead on immediate survival. He spotted a rock formation that would provide shelter and began moving toward it, each step carefully measured. The crystalline entity wasn't far from him, its usually brilliant structure already showing cracks from the gravity. Human. It called out in the common galactic language. Help me. Marcus wanted to help, but he knew it was already too late. As he watched, hairline fractures spread across its surface. Within minutes, it shattered into 1,000 glittering pieces. 2 down. The silicon creature was doing slightly better, having evolved on a planet with at least some gravity. It managed to crawl toward a cave, but didn't notice the signs Marcus had immediately spotted. The scratches around the entrance, the scattered bones, the fresh tracks. "Don't go in there," Marcus shouted, but it was too late. A massive creature, something like a cross between a bear and a lizard, lunged from the cave. The silicon being never stood a chance. 3 down. The observation drones zoomed in on Marcus now, the only survivor of this group. He could almost hear the excited commentary back at the tribunal. But he had more important things to worry about, like the second predator that had just emerged from behind the metallic trees. The creature was huge, easily 4 meters tall, with armored scales and 6 powerful limbs. Its eyes locked onto Marcus, seeing him as easy prey. But Marcus didn't run. Instead, he grabbed a nearby rock, testing its weight in the heavy gravity. The predator charged. Marcus waited until the last possible moment, then dove to the side, a move he practiced countless times in Earth's deserts. As the creature passed, he brought the rock down hard on a spot just behind its armored head, a vulnerable point he'd noticed in the scattered bones of its previous victims. The beast collapsed, not dead but stunned. Marcus quickly retreated to his chosen shelter, gathering useful materials along the way. The drones followed his every move as he began setting up a basic camp, using techniques he'd taught for years on Earth. Back in the tribunal chamber, the aliens watched in stunned silence as the human not only survived, but began to establish himself. Judge Bright's skin had turned an interesting shade of confused yellow. "Impossible," Judge Clear chimed, their crystalline form vibrating with disbelief. The gravity alone should have incapacitated him. But Marcus was far from incapacitated. As Crucible's sun set, casting the landscape in deep purple shadows, he had already started a fire using local materials and began constructing basic tools. This wasn't just survival. This was the beginning of adaptation. The tribunal had meant to break him. Instead, they had given him exactly the kind of challenge humans excelled at overcoming. In the tribunal's private observation chamber, Judge Bright's skin flickered between shades of confusion and frustration as he watched the screens. 2 weeks had passed, and the human was not only alive but thriving on Crucible. Most fascinating, Judge Clear chimed, their crystalline form reflecting the light from dozens of monitoring displays. He's actually training the local predators. The screen showed Marcus working in the area around his shelter. He had established a clear territory, marking boundaries in ways the local creatures seemed to understand. Even more surprisingly, he was regularly feeding smaller pieces of his kills to some of the lesser predators, creating what the xenobiologists were calling a cooperative hunting relationship. "This is unprecedented," muttered Chief Observer Green, his tentacles rapidly taking notes. "No species has ever managed to form bonds with Crucible's wildlife. They're supposed to be completely hostile to off-world life." On the main screen, Marcus demonstrated exactly why he was succeeding where others had failed. A large predator, even bigger than the one he'd fought on his first day, approached his camp. Instead of running or fighting, Marcus stood his ground and made a series of sharp, clicking sounds he learned to mimic from the smaller hunters. The massive creature paused, its 6 eyes studying him carefully. Marcus tossed it a large piece of meat from his latest hunt. The beast caught it, made a rumbling sound that the observers had never heard before, and retreated peacefully. "He's not just surviving," Counselor Reed commented from her position near the back of the room. "He's building a sustainable system." Her voice carried a hint of pride that she quickly masked when the judges turned to look at her. The cameras panned across Marcus's expanded camp. He had constructed a surprisingly sturdy shelter using the metallic trees and local stone. Strips of dried meat hung in a sheltered area, while various tools and weapons lay organized nearby. He even started a small garden with some of the less dangerous local plants. "Look at this data," Green exclaimed, pulling up a new chart. "His muscle density has increased by 15% to adapt to the gravity. His bone structure is actually getting stronger. It's as if his body is treating Crucible like some sort of extreme training environment." Judge Bright's skin darkened with concern. This was meant to be a punishment, not a demonstration of human capabilities. The public feeds are generating unprecedented viewing numbers. He's becoming some sort of hero. Indeed, the public broadcasts of Marcus's exile had become the most watched program across the galactic networks. Species from thousands of worlds tuned in daily to watch the human who turned a death sentence into a triumph of adaptation. "Perhaps we should terminate the broadcast," suggested Clear, but even their crystalline form seemed uncertain. "Too late," Reed interjected. "The feeds are being recorded and shared across every major system. Cutting them now would only generate more interest." She paused, studying the latest footage. "Besides, I believe he's about to show us something new." The observers watched as Marcus approached what they had previously classified as a death zone, an area where even Crucible's native creatures feared to tread. He carried several of his handmade tools and wore armor crafted from the scales of fallen predators. Surely he's not going to. Green's tentacles twisted in anxiety. But Marcus walked straight into the zone, his movements careful but confident. The observers held their breath collectively as he disappeared into a cave that their sensors had never been able to penetrate. "Send in more drones," Judge Bright ordered, his skin pulsing with agitation. "We can't lose sight of him." "The drones can't handle the magnetic disturbance in that area," Reed explained calmly. "We'll just have to wait." The waiting was interrupted by a sudden burst of activity on the sensors. Something was emerging from the cave, but it wasn't just Marcus. He was carrying something that made all the observers lean forward in shock. For the first time in recorded history, someone had discovered what lay hidden in Crucible's most dangerous regions. And once again, the human prisoner was about to change everything the Galactic Tribunal thought they knew about their own sector of space. Marcus emerged from the death zone, carrying something that made the observation drones zoom in frantically. In his hands, wrapped carefully in predator hide, were crystals unlike anything the galactic community had ever seen. They pulsed with an inner light, changing colors in rhythm with his heartbeat. "Living crystals," he said aloud, knowing the drones would pick up his words. "And there's an entire cave system full of them." Back in his camp, which now looked more like a proper outpost, Marcus set the crystals in a specially prepared container. 3 months on Crucible had taught him to be careful with new discoveries. The planet had already tried to kill him in more ways than he could count. His shelter had evolved from a simple cave into a fortified compound. The walls, made from stacked local stone and reinforced with metallic tree bark, kept out the worst of Crucible's frequent storms. Inside, he had created separate areas for food storage, tool-making, and his latest project, scientific research. A loud screech from outside made him smile. Tom, the six-legged predator he befriended, and named after his old cat back on Earth, was alerting him to visitors. Through the reinforced window, Marcus saw 3 figures stumbling through the harsh landscape, new prisoners dropped by the tribunal. "Here we go again," he muttered, grabbing his emergency kit. Unlike the first group he watched die, these newcomers might have a chance. He'd made sure of that. 2 weeks earlier, he had started leaving survival markers near the drop zones, simple signs showing where to find safe water and which areas to avoid. It was his way of giving others a fighting chance, though few survived long enough to read them. As he approached the group, he saw they were in better shape than most new arrivals. They'd found his markers and followed his instructions, making their way toward his compound instead of wandering into predator territories. "Welcome to Crucible," he called out, keeping his distance until he could assess them. "I'm Marcus. If you want to survive, you'll need to follow my lead." The 3 prisoners, a reptilian merchant accused of trading in restricted goods, a mechanical engineer from the outer rings charged with sabotage, and a botanical researcher caught stealing ancient seeds, looked at him with a mixture of hope and disbelief. "The human who lives," the reptilian gasped, struggling with the gravity. "The broadcasts. They're real." Marcus helped them into his compound, already planning how to use their skills. The engineer could help him build better tools, the botanist could expand his growing food selection, and the reptilian's trading knowledge might prove valuable for his bigger plans. As he treated their gravity sickness with local herbs he'd discovered, Marcus explained his most recent finding. "These crystals aren't just pretty lights," he said, showing them the pulsing stones. "They're a power source unlike anything in known space. They respond to biological rhythms, and I think they're what keeps Crucible's incredible ecosystem running." The engineer's eyes widened. "If we could harness that power." "Exactly," Marcus nodded. "But first, you need to survive. Rule 1. Respect the planet. Crucible isn't trying to kill you. It's testing you. Meet its standards, and it rewards you." Over the next few hours, as he taught them basic survival techniques, Marcus watched the observation drones hovering overhead. He knew his actions would shock the tribunal again. Instead of hoarding his knowledge and letting others die, he was building a community. The living crystals in their container pulsed stronger, as if approving his choices. Marcus had long suspected that Crucible itself was more than just a deadly world. It was a testing ground. And humans, with their endless adaptability, had finally found the key to unlocking its secrets. As night fell and his new companions rested in the safety of his compound, Marcus added more notes to his journal. Tomorrow, he would show them the network of caves he'd discovered, the strange markings that hinted at ancient visitors, and the real reason the tribunal had labeled this planet as forbidden. Crucible wasn't just a prison anymore. It was becoming humanity's greatest discovery. The attack came during one of Crucible's violent storms. 3 new prisoners arrived in pods that looked slightly different from the usual transport vessels. Marcus noticed the difference immediately. These weren't standard prison pods. Lightning split the purple sky as the assassins emerged, their environment suits more advanced than anything previously sent to Crucible. They moved with practiced coordination despite the crushing gravity, heading straight for Marcus's compound. "Get everyone into the cave system," Marcus ordered his small community of survivors, now numbering 6. He had learned to trust his instincts on Crucible, and right now, they were screaming danger. The lead assassin, taller than the others, raised what looked like a modified pulse rifle. "Marcus Stone," the figure's voice crackled through an external speaker. The Council sends its regards." Marcus didn't waste time responding. He threw himself behind a boulder as energy bolts scorched the air where he had stood. The assassins were good. They had planned this well, attacking during a storm when the observation drones would be grounded. But they had made one crucial mistake. They thought they were hunting him on their terms. This was Crucible, and here Marcus had advantages they couldn't imagine. He let out a series of sharp whistles, a signal he had developed over months of working with the local wildlife. The assassins laughed, the sound distorting through their speakers. "Calling for help from your pets," the leader mocked. "How primitive." The ground trembled. At first, the assassins thought it was just another storm effect. Then Tom, Marcus's massive six-legged predator ally, burst from behind the compound, followed by 3 others of his kind. The assassin's superior weapons meant little against 4 tons of armored, angry predator. 2 of them panicked, breaking formation. That was all Marcus needed. He sprinted through the rain, his body long adapted to Crucible's gravity, and tackled the leader. They fought in the mud, the assassin's advanced suit giving them almost equal strength to Marcus's naturally enhanced muscles. Almost. A deafening roar froze everyone in place. Through the storm came a sight that made even Tom and his pack retreat. One of Crucible's apex predators, a creature Marcus had named the Judge, for its habit of watching conflicts from afar before choosing whether to intervene. The assassins, not understanding what they were seeing, opened fire on the massive beast. Their energy weapons barely scratched its natural armor. "Stop," Marcus shouted. "Drop your weapons and don't move." 2 of the assassins ignored him, continuing to fire. The Judge's response was swift and terrible. Marcus looked away as the screams were cut short. The lead assassin, pinned under Marcus, finally showed wisdom and went still. The Judge approached them, its 8 eyes studying the scene. Marcus slowly stood up, pulling the assassin with him. "This is why you don't survive here, with just weapons and tech," Marcus said calmly, though his heart was racing. "Crucible demands respect. It tests you, judges you, and if you're worthy, it protects you." The Judge made a low rumbling sound that Marcus had learned meant approval. The massive creature turned and walked away, leaving them in the dying storm. Marcus removed the assassin's helmet, revealing the shocked female face with the distinctive markings of the Tribunal's elite security force. "Welcome to my world," he said. "Now, would you like to survive?" The observation drones, emerging as the storm cleared, captured everything. Across the galaxy, billions watched as Marcus not only defeated the assassination attempt, but saved his would-be killer. In the tribunal chamber, Judge Bright's skin had turned pure white with shock. He turned our assassin's arrival into a lesson about the planet. The Judge whispered, "He's not just surviving anymore. He's changing the very nature of our punishment system." Counselor Reed allowed herself a small smile. The broadcast had just been the most watched event in galactic history, and every second showed humanity's true strength. Not their physical power or their technology, but their ability to adapt, teach, and turn enemies into allies. On Crucible, Marcus began teaching the shaken assassin the first rule of survival: respect the planet that tests you. Another storm was building on the horizon, but this time, it wasn't coming from Crucible's skies. It was brewing in the halls of galactic power. The Great Hall of the Galactic Science Academy was packed with beings from 1,000 worlds. Floating screens showed live feeds from Crucible, where Marcus's compound had grown into a thriving research station. 6 months had passed since the failed assassination attempt, and everything had changed. Professor Light, the Academy's head researcher, gestured at the data streams flowing across the central display. The human survival was not luck or simple physical adaptation. The glowing being announced, "What we're seeing is perhaps the most significant discovery in galactic history." The screen showed Marcus leading a mixed group of former prisoners, now researchers, through the crystal caves. The former assassin who had tried to kill him, now his chief of security, walked beside him. The living crystals he discovered aren't just power sources, Professor Light continued. They're part of a planetary consciousness. Crucible isn't just a death world, it's an ancient testing ground. In the audience, Judge Bright shifted uncomfortably as his skin flickered with embarrassment. The tribunal had unknowingly been sending prisoners to one of the most important scientific sites in the galaxy, and it took a human to figure it out. The footage showed Marcus touching one of the larger crystals, which pulsed in sync with his heartbeat. The planet tests all who land on it, Professor Light explained. The gravity, the predators, the storms, they're not random hazards. They're trials. And humans, it seems, are uniquely suited to pass these tests. New data scrolled across the screens. Survival rates had jumped from 0% to 30% since Marcus began teaching others. More importantly, those who survived showed dramatic physical and mental improvements. The crystals weren't just responding to them, they were changing them. We've detected similar crystal formations on 17 other worlds previously classified as death worlds. A crystalline scientist chimed in, all of them positioned at key points across the galaxy, all of them waiting for species capable of understanding them. In the back of the hall, Counselor Reed watched as the scientific community came to terms with what she had suspected for months. Humanity wasn't just another species joining the galactic community. They were the key to unlocking its greatest mysteries. The screen switched to a new scene. Marcus working with one of the largest predators, using it to help transport building materials. The beast, which could easily crush him, followed his directions with almost gentle care. The human approach to survival. Professor Light's glow intensified with excitement, is unlike anything we've seen. Where others try to conquer or hide, they adapt and cooperate. They turn threats into allies, problems into opportunities. The footage showed Marcus's latest project, a training center for other species wanting to learn survival skills. Already, dozens of worlds had sent volunteers to study under him. The human who was meant to die in exile was now teaching the galaxy how to be stronger. Judge Clear, attending remotely via hologram, spoke up. The tribunal must formally acknowledge our error. The classification of humans as a dangerous species was not just wrong. It was dangerously ignorant of their true potential. The assembled scientists turned as someone new entered the hall. Marcus himself, appearing via hologram from Crucible, stood before them. 6 months on the death world had changed him. He stood straighter, moved with fluid grace despite the crushing gravity, and his eyes held a depth of understanding that made even the oldest beings pause. Crucible isn't finished teaching us, he said, his voice calm but powerful. The crystal network, the ancient trials, the planetary consciousness, they're all part of something bigger, something the ancient builders left for species ready to take the next step. He held up one of the living crystals, its light pulsing in perfect harmony with his heartbeat. We're not just solving the mystery of one death world, he continued. We're unlocking the next stage of galactic evolution, and we want to help everyone be part of it. The hall erupted in excited discussion. Species that had once feared or looked down on humans now saw them in a new light. Humanity hadn't just survived the ultimate punishment, they had turned it into the greatest discovery in galactic history. And Marcus Stone, the exiled diplomat who was meant to die alone on a death world, had become something unprecedented. A teacher to the stars themselves. One standard galactic year had passed since Marcus Stone first set foot on Crucible. The tribunal chamber, once the site of his sentencing, was now packed for a very different occasion. Representatives from every major species crowded the galleries, their attention fixed on the central platform where Marcus stood. He looked different now. His body had been transformed by Crucible's gravity, his movements fluid and powerful even in standard gravity. A living crystal hung from a chain around his neck, its soft pulse matching his heartbeat. Judge Bright, his skin now a humble shade of blue, addressed the assembly. We gather today to correct a historic mistake. Marcus Stone, you were sent to Crucible as punishment. Instead, you have given the galaxy its greatest gift in 10,000 years. Through the massive windows, everyone could see the changes. Ships from dozens of worlds orbited the station, waiting to transport volunteers to Crucible. What was once a death sentence had become the most prestigious training opportunity in known space. The Tribunal offers you full pardon and restoration of all rights. Judge Clear chimed, their crystalline form reflecting the chamber's lights. You are free to return to Earth or any world of your choosing. Marcus stepped forward, the crystal at his neck pulsing brighter. With respect, your honors, I choose to stay on Crucible. A murmur ran through the crowd. On the screens behind him, footage showed his transformed compound. What had started as a simple shelter was now the Crucible Academy of Planetary Studies. Over 50 students from different species trained there, learning not just to survive, but to understand the planet's ancient secrets. The living crystals we discovered, Marcus continued, are part of a network spanning the galaxy. Each death world is a piece of the puzzle left by whoever came before us. Crucible isn't just my prison anymore. It's my home, and humanity's gift to the galactic community. Judge Bright's skin rippled with acceptance. Then we hereby appoint you as Crucible's official governor and head of the new Galactic Adaptation Institute. The chamber erupted in applause. In the gallery, Counselor Reed smiled proudly. Her gamble had paid off. Humanity had proved itself not through force or diplomacy, but through their unique ability to adapt and teach others to do the same. Tom, Marcus's first predator ally, now sat calmly beside his platform, a living symbol of humanity's approach to challenges. Several alien children in the gallery pointed at the massive creature with excitement rather than fear. There's one more thing, Marcus said, raising his hand for quiet. The Crystal Network showed us something remarkable. The beings who built this system, they weren't testing us for survival. He paused, letting his words sink in. They were preparing us for their return. The chamber went silent. On every screen, the living crystals across multiple worlds pulsed in unison, as if acknowledging the truth being spoken. Humanity doesn't want to rule or dominate, Marcus continued. We want to help prepare every species for what's coming. The ancient builders left these trials because they knew someone would need to be ready, not just to survive, but to thrive in the challenges ahead. He touched the crystal at his neck, and all the screens lit up with new data. Star maps, ancient symbols, patterns that stretched across the galaxy. This is why we adapt. This is why we teach. Because the greatest test isn't surviving on one death world. It's being ready when the builders return to see what we've learned. The assembly rose to their feet, species that had once been enemies standing together. The human they had tried to break had instead united them with a purpose greater than their differences. As the ceremony concluded, Marcus looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, other death worlds waited to be understood. Other crystals waited to share their knowledge. And humanity, once feared for their adaptability, would lead the way in preparing the galaxy for what was to come. The Tribunal had meant to write his death sentence. Instead, they had helped write the first chapter of the galaxy's next great adventure. And Marcus Stone, the human who smiled at death, stood ready to teach them all how to smile back.